right, everybody, let's just take a moment to acknowledge the importance of our practice and what we're about at COSM, which is consistent meditation and mindfulness. So let's just center ourselves for a few minutes. And that can be closing your eyes or gazing down, sitting still, sitting comfortably in a way that works for you and supports your own practice. And then I like to begin by taking 3 deep breaths. So I just invite you to take 3 deep breaths at your own pace. Deep inhale, deep exhale. And then just allowing your breathing to be a little bit deeper and more rhythmic than your natural breathing. When I say natural breathing, I mean the breathing you do when you're not thinking about breathing. But right now, we're kind of thinking about our breathing, and that's okay. Just getting our breath in a rhythm that feels good, focusing on the in-breath and the out-breath. Simply taking time to appreciate this moment of pause, this moment of stillness, this moment of connecting. And then just finally taking a moment to express gratitude. Gratitude towards yourself, gratitude towards others. What in this moment is coming to mind for you to feel grateful for? And let us take a moment to think of at least one thing about COSM that we are grateful for. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes and return fully present. Thank you for joining me in that practice. And for our Facebook family out there, thank you for joining us in the practice. We do always open these equity conversations by sharing what is your personal practice like? And this is a bit of a recap for us because my COSM presidential term is up. I can't believe it's been 3 years. It's like flown by. So it feels like 2. It doesn't feel like 3. I'm gonna be honest, it feels like 2. It doesn't feel like 3. But that's a good reason why we have a 3-year term, because by the time you're really, hitting your stride at some point, you're kind of there. But I bring up the 3-year piece and also with that question, because part of what has been really important for me and my purpose in leadership with COSM has been to let there be freedom in mindfulness and freedom with meditation, and that it's not this one packaged thing and we have to do it a certain way for it to be right, and it has to look a certain way. And so that in and of itself, in a lot of ways, is equity and inclusion, right? When we offer an approach, when we offer a practice, when we do a sharing about something and allow others to make it their own and not make that wrong, and just let it be what it is, because just because we don't do it the way someone else might do it doesn't mean it's not working. It doesn't mean that it's less than. It doesn't mean that it's not right. And so that question has always been very powerful for me to ask our guests in the series, what is your personal practice like? So we can normalize that people's practices look different and that people's practices serve them. And so my practice is, I have a morning routine that, and I really call it a morning ritual, that is a routine that encompasses my mindfulness practice and my meditation. And I have a little altar that has special things that are important to me and for me. And sometimes there's affirmations on it or areas that I want to focus my intention and attention. There's a timer on it, an hourglass timer. There's a feather. There's something, sometimes I'll just want to hold a rock or a crystal and I'll just hold it just to keep my attention sometimes. And I just sit and breathe. And that is really my practice. I don't do a lot of guided meditation in the morning. I'm learning to enjoy more guided meditation, but generally first thing in the morning, I want to own my consciousness. I want to own what I'm pouring into myself for that day and putting out into my own intention, into my own energy for how I want to experience my day. And so that's really important to me. And on a not great day, I sit for 5 minutes. On a really awesome day, I sit for a good 40 minutes. I also cheat a little bit because, we all have our mind as it wanders. And so I keep a pad and pen right there at my meditation space. And when those things start coming in the morning, don't forget to, make sure you do this. I jot those down. I really call it sometimes, like, it's not the funnest phrase, but I'm like mental vomit. I'm like, let me get this list out of me so that I can be super present. Like, instead of me trying to hold on to it and remember I'm thinking that so I can be like ultra still, I'm like, nah, that's going to distract me the whole time. So I'm just jotting the things down, and literally, like, after those things make it to the list, I am just so much more present to myself. And I laugh because I'm like, present to myself to be present to nothing. Yes, present to myself to be present to nothing. And then what's also really amazing is that whatever makes it onto that list, if I get those things done that day, the day goes extra smooth. It's almost like that's the download, like, make sure you do these things today kind of vibe. And my day just goes really smooth. So that's my practice. And I end with some affirmations. I end with some positive thoughts. And then I feel really ready to start my day. And I try to do it on the weekends, but it's like without fail during the week, without fail. I just feel like I'm not entirely fit for human consumption if I don't do that. So that's my practice. There's also a free ebook that I'll also share with Tracy. She can put it on the COSM site as well, that just encourages us to set up what is almost like what we would call the calm down corner for kids, but setting up this, what I call an altar space or meditation space, which is like having your own personal Zen zone, your own personal calm down corner that supports your practice. And for me, it makes it a lot of fun. And so, it is shifted with me as I have shifted. And it's just a coffee table with a cushion and some fun objects on it. So, yeah.
Thank you, Tovi. I know, and I've read through that that ebook that you have, it's powerful. So yeah, that'd be great with this recording on our member site, and we'll share it in our next newsletter as well. So you have a little mini lesson to share with us.
I do.
Yeah, let's hear that, and then we'll open it up for any questions from.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we have in Racial Healing Allies, we saw this piece around diversity, equity, and inclusion kind of growth. And it was a meme that really caught my attention. I thought about, wow, how can we use this to kind of monitor what is our growth like in this work? How do we know that we're growing? And one of my favorite phrases to ask for people to check in is, how is your growing showing? How do you know that you're growing and that things are working? And so I modified this. We ended up modifying this to look at our growth zone. And what are the competencies, not only the competencies for leading for equity, but how do we know that we're growing in our competency, right? And what are the emotional competencies that support these zones that we're in? And sometimes we're in the fear zone. And with this be-do framework, remember the beingness is that mindset. The beingness is your embodiment. The beingness is like that feeling tone that we have. And the doing is how we actualize our being. So we can't do anything more than what we be. We cannot do anything more than what we be. And so when we're operating in the fear zone around equity and inclusion work, the things that we might do look like, I only operate and talk to, and I'm around other people that look and think like me. And I avoid conversations about race and racism at all costs, because that keeps me really comfortable. In that being part of the fear zone is always striving for comfort. How can I always navigate for comfort? How can I avoid hard questions? How can I even deny that racism is even a problem that we should be dealing with, right? So if I'm in the fear zone, those are some of the characteristics, if you will, that would denote that I'm in the fear zone. If I'm in the learning zone, I'm going to start to branch out more, and I'm going to start looking to be around other people that are not like me. I'm going to listen differently. I'm going to listen with curiosity. I'm going to listen as though it's really the truth. I'm going to go ahead and just share this as well. Let me get the link. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, because I'm actually going to ask us to have some conversation around this, and I want you to be able to look at it. So give me 1 second. This should work for you, Dina and Tracy. Okay. Does that work for you? Is it opening? Great. So let me go back to it on screen share. I should have chatted it before. I'm not used to being the guest in this way. That's happening. So in the learning zone, we also, it's what it implies, right? I'm going to start educating myself, not only from lived experience from people I'm engaging with, but I'm going to be looking for books. I'm going to be looking for resources. I'm going to be doing things that stretch me and might make me uncomfortable a bit. But that's part of my learning, and my unlearning is that discomfort. In the below the green line aspect, I'm going to be vulnerable about my own biases and my knowledge gaps, meaning I'm going to lean into the uncertainty of what I don't know. I'm going to have emotional risk involved to do some of the sharing that I'm doing. We'll start to look at our own privilege, and that doesn't just mean white privilege, but that can mean class privilege. It can mean gender, sexuality privilege, things that we're also looking at. But in this case, we're talking about racial healing and racism. So we're just going to hold that lens. And then I recognize that racism is a past and current problem. So in that learning zone, those are just some of the things, right? That could be some of the indicators. And then there's that growth zone. The growth zone where we're starting to practice self-compassion. We'll go below the green line. How is self-compassion showing up as an emotional competency? As I'm starting to question and unlearn some of my own conditioning that I've learned in this society. I'm not going to let any mistakes deter me from being better. I'm going to learn from my mistakes. I'm not going to berate myself. I'm not going to make that, allow my mistakes to keep me silent. I'm going to cultivate my resilience. I'm going to lean into becoming stronger and more resilient in this work. What I like to say, racial stamina. I'm going to cultivate my racial stamina. I'm going to sit with my discomfort. I'm not going to try to bypass it. I'm not going to try to push it away. I'm going to just acknowledge, you know what, I'm really uncomfortable, and let me just be with that. Let me sit with that and explore where that's taking me. Where is it even coming from? What does it mean? What's it teaching me? What am I learning from my own discomfort? And I'm also going to start to identify how might I unknowingly benefit from racism in some ways. How does that work? How does white dominant culture benefit me or serve me in some ways, right? And then on the doing side of the growth zone, I'm going to get more intentional about being around people that are not like me. I'm going to promote and advocate for policies and leaders that are anti-racist, that are more inclusive. I'm going to speak out. I'm going to interrupt things that are happening when I see racism in action or I hear something that shouldn't be said. I'm going to educate my family. I'm going to educate my peers. And I'm going to use my own privilege, use my own influence as well to provide spaces and yield seats of power to people who are in marginalized groups so that the voice is truly at the table, so that things look different and can be different. Okay, so this is just a small framework, a short framework to start to look at what does this growth look like? And the arrow kept going because we know that there's more, right? If we're really on this journey, we're going to keep going and evolving. And that arrow is only going as far as we are. And as far as the field itself in this work is. So it would have been presumptuous of me to like not have an arrow that kept going, right? Like this is the growth zone. Well, no, there's more. We just don't always know what that is and what that looks like. So I want to give us all an opportunity to reflect. What zone are you in and how do you know? So I'm going to give you about 1 minute just to think that over. What zone are you in and how do you know? And Dina or Tracy, when you're ready to share, you can just unmute yourself.
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah, and we have a few more besides just Dina and I too, if anybody else wants to share.
I'm sorry, I don't see anyone who's not on video on my screen, so I apologize if I did not acknowledge that. I apologize. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. I really like looking at this framework. It helps me be honest with myself. I think I go between different zones. A lot of the work I do is at the computer kind of by myself, and you know, I feel like with COVID, I'm just starting to like, you know, do more out of the house and stuff. So I feel like when I'm in a smaller bubble, it takes me a while then to get out of that fear zone. You get in that comfort zone, and yeah, so I feel like I'm right now rarely in the growth zone, and I feel that I've only come out of the fear zone with having mentorship from, taking the Racial Healing Allies course. That was one of the first things, like with founding and starting Coalition of Schools Educating Mindfully. I didn't know what I was getting into. I'm like, oh, I'll just do it. I'm going to do a conference for, Chicagoland area. And then I started getting these downloads and inspirations from educators I was talking to about, creating this Joining Forces organization. So I'm very happy that back then I just, little fears that came up, I just stayed with the love and inspiration and moved forward. So I feel like if I, keep in that mindset, that this growth, just to feel not, because it is a worry when I look at some of these things and feel that I'm not, living up to what I know I can be. But again, to note that, to observe those feelings, and then I think a lot of what I've proved to myself with just taking leaps of faith with COSM helps me know that I can also, like, really excited about the growth I can do in this area as well. And that was one of the, tying this in a little bit to having you come on as president, pretty much, I think it was about 9 months after we launched. So pretty much from the very beginning, my first of many thank yous to you that it's all synchronous. I mean, we found each other on Facebook. I mean, hey, the good things of Facebook. And so, yeah, so that's what I'll share for now, just my thoughts on.
Thank you for naming that. And I want to highlight something that you did name too, that when you apply this concept of these zones to other areas, you're realizing it's the same muscle, right? It's just but you're applying it to a certain area. And that's really important for us to name and note when we get overwhelmed about this racialized experience and how we're growing in it. The same muscle that you're going to use other things to be tenacious and persistent and stretch your cognitive growth, it applies. It's just, where are we focusing it, right? Where are we giving it attention and intention? So thank you for highlighting that as well. Same muscle, different context. Tina.
So I feel like there are times where I still am in the fear zone, depending on the circumstance, I guess. And it's more, I think, in my school setting than anywhere else. But I also have increased my curiosity and noticing in so many different realms of this work. So I'm kind of feel empowered these days because I am intentionally promoting and encouraging conversations with teachers that I don't necessarily have a deep connection with. And one of the teachers, I have her son, and I absolutely love having him. And he has opened my eyes to so much. And I had a really beautiful conversation with her the other day. And like, my gut's like, there's nothing, like, I know she's this different skin colored woman, but like, her heart is in the same place as mine. Like, her being is in the same place. Her passion for teaching, her passion for her kids. And it just brought this like reality to me in a really soulful way. I felt safe doing it. I was like, wow, this was a great conversation. This is a great positive interaction that I wasn't judging either way. I was like, I just want to have this conversation. And that is very out of my box. it's always out of my box to have a conversation. It's always in my box to have a conversation about kids, but then go to that next level of going to the connection of her being a mom and sharing likenesses and kids. And, you know, I said, how hard is it for you to have your son here at school in the next classroom next to you and teach the same grade level? And, you know, it just was this enriching, awesome conversation. And now we check in every day. And there's stuff that I've asked her that I've never asked anybody else. And she was just, she's our representative of our equity team. And she, being a lesbian, she's interested in my realm too. So it's brought us even tighter. And I'm just so honored to have that truth and that honesty in her. It's just kind of like, so she's kind of like helping me move into that learning, more out of that fear and into that learning mode a little bit.
Beautiful, beautiful. And what you're also naming that I'm hearing is that connection fuels openness. And it's easier to collaborate with other people when we feel open, right? When we're constricted and expected to work with people and we're constricted and closed, that the research says that actually stops creativity. It stops innovation. It stops collectivism in a healthy way. And so this openness, you're saying, you know, I've asked questions I haven't been able to ask, or I'm able to, like, that means something. And our brains are wired that when we're feeling good about the people we're connecting with, we're more creative, we're more innovative, and we're more collaborative. And those are things that move our schools forward instead of keeping us stuck. So see, those types of emotions that come just from inclusion, just from connection. That's how powerful it is. Thank you for sharing that, Zena. Does anyone else want to share? Wait a moment.
We're getting a really bad thunderstorm. Hang on. I gotta close windows.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you then to also reflect on what emotion can you name for yourself? When you think about the zone that you're in, what emotions come up for you? What emotions are present for you? When you're in that zone. And I am going to ask you all to each name an emotion. And while you're thinking about the emotion that is present for you, what emotion is the open opposite of that? Like, when you think about the emotion that you're naming that's present for you, that the zone that you're in, what is the opposite emotion of that one in your interpretation? Can we think about that? Dina, were you able to hear me when you were walking around? Okay, no worries. I'm gonna repeat it.
Sorry.
It's okay. When you think about,
Go ahead.
when you think about the zone that you're in, what emotion can you name that's present for you? And it can be more than one, but definitely name one. And then what's the opposite emotion of that? Okay, so you're going to end up coming up with two emotions, the emotion that you're experiencing, and then the emotion that you think is the opposite of that one. Kristen, do you want to share at all about the zone you feel like you might be in?
Sorry, I was just looking at the slide right now. Apologies for being late.
No worries.
Yeah, I think at a really quick view, I think I'm in the learning zone.
So the
And-
question was, I'm going to pause you for a second. So the
Yeah.
question before the emotion question before you came on is, what zone are you in and how do you know? So if you're in the learning zone, cool. And how do you know?
Yeah, so I was just looking at the descriptors named there. Yeah, I mean, I think I know because I feel uncomfortable a lot of the time. Which is a place to lead into and is not easy, but I think becoming more comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. I do feel really vulnerable and but recognizing just how like important and starting to really feel how important those vulnerable conversations could be to express, because I think as a white woman I've had a lot of like I wanted to protect myself from like not being this perfect equity leader and knowing that, but so just becoming just really comfortable, like I am going to stumble and I'm going to not do it just right. And so anyway, I think those are some of the ways that I feel I've been feeling. And I think that puts me maybe in that place of disequilibrium, which I think is a learning zone, as this model was shared.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else before we move into what emotion can we name? Okay. So what emotion did we come up with? What emotion are you able to name from the zone that you're in? And you can just unmute yourself, anyone who wants to share.
I guess I feel like excited and happy that I've ventured and pushed myself. But at the same time, on the other end, I'm frustrated because I was like, it shouldn't be this way. Like I don't know how to say what I want to say, but I'm like frustrated that this even has to be a thing, right? Why is there such disconnect in this interbeing that we all are, you know? Like and part of me gets frustrated because I don't have a lot of tolerance for people who are not understanding or willing. And I have to really like hold back and pull back a little bit in my heart to protect myself, because I could jump in with 2 feet sometimes. And there is this like kind of deep-seated anger, frustration that starts to come out. And that's usually not a side of me that I really do or share. It's like I'm not angry very much, very often, you know. It's, to me, it's like it's wasted energy. There's challenging moments, but it's wasted. I'd rather sit with it a little bit and try to work through it. So, you know, there's times I just want to shake people and I'm like, well, listen to what you're saying, or do you have a heart right now? Like, are you listening with any type of empathy or compassion? So.
I love that you named the empathy and compassion. And one thing that happens, but when I think about the emotional intelligence behind being able to navigate through these zones, you named frustration and intolerance, right? And those are frustrations that are connected to judgment, when we're making a judgment. And I'm going to bring us full circle in that. Okay, so we know, what does mindfulness and meditation do for us around judgment? Right, you already know. So it helps us to, of course, get to that place of greater equanimity and not having those feelings of judgment. And it's normal at the same time in so many ways, but our practice helps ground us in being less judgmental, in expressing that empathy and compassion instead of frustration and intolerance, be it towards ourselves or towards others. So the competencies that we're striving for as we're becoming more inclusive leaders and leading for equity: empathy, compassion, non-judgment. So you're helping us move the needle there just through this conversation and this awareness, right? This awareness that's arising. So thank you, Dina. Who else would like to share on the emotions that are present for them?
I almost can't even pinpoint I'm guessing it's just fear, but it's more of just emotionality in general, like the fragility, like feeling but the mindfulness skills help me work through that, like the feeling the hotness and the contraction, and knowing that if I keep breathing, it'll keep me grounded so that the emotions don't help me flip the lid so that I can't be keeping that courageous conversation going and leaning into it instead of retreating back. So it's like in the process noting, like I'm like, I'm like, I need that wheel showing all the emotions. I can't, definitely.
Yeah.
But I think it's just more of I know fragility isn't maybe an emotion, but it's just like that over feeling the emotion, whatever it is.
It's a good word, and I know it's like, it's not an emotion, but maybe it should be. But it's I love you're naming contraction, because I almost made the prompt around what emotion makes you contract when you're in the zone. And I was like, okay, that's a little too leading. So I took the word out, and because you're also naming it too, Tracy, like you named fear, fragility, hotness, contraction, retreating back, all things that make us kind of shrink, right? And make us small when we want to show up with what Brene would refer to as grounded confidence. It's like, so how are we open? And you already named it. That grounded confidence comes not only from that openness, but it's also around the skills. Like you have grounded confidence when you have the skills and you practice using the skills. It's not about always getting it right. It's, can you anchor in the moment to the skills that I need to be using to make it through this difficult situation that I'm in, to make it through this challenging conversation, to make it through this moment when everything in me is saying, no, come back, just hide and be okay. And you're like, no, I can be here with grounded confidence. Right? And that grounded confidence is always calling to us. It's calling to us. We want to wrap. Kristen, unless you have a share. But if you do, we don't have
Emily,
to.
Jessica also.
Yeah, I was going to ask them too. So if anyone has a share along these lines, because I want to just go ahead, Jessica. Hi.
Hi. So I just wanted to apologize for being so late. I was working and lost track of time. I feel like I'm coming in having not known the context of exactly where we were starting from. So, but feeling like I want to be having these hard conversations, especially in the school system. Working as a special ed teacher, there's a lot of conversations that I feel like are being put on the back burner, and a lot of things that kids are bringing to the forefront that aren't being addressed in a direct way that I want to feel more confident in helping to be that voice for them and to stand up for them. Yeah.
Thank you. And this space really is fluid, so don't feel bad about arriving after we started. No, truly,
Thank
because you know there's the recording, and we're happy that you're here and bringing your voice into the space. So welcome, welcome. And this is important work. It is, and I'm glad that you see the value in it. I'm still so perplexed that we as a nation can serve the amount of children that we serve that are of color by adults not of color, and we have like no no initial training to make that happen, right? To bridge the cultural disconnect, if you will. And so I'm always really pleased when people are using their own time to recognize the value that this is a skill, this is information, this is a way of being that I need to better inhabit so that I can do my job better, right? And in service of children. And my biggest hope and my biggest dream is that we are creating schools that we don't need to heal from. And especially for our children, that we're creating schools and institutions that we no longer need to heal from. That is my biggest hope and dream. And how do we make that possible, right? Yeah. And so we do the work. We lean in, we have the hard conversations, we do the work. And if you have any questions, all right, I needed to pause. Some people have questions for me sometimes. So if we have any questions, we can move into some Q&A.
I just wanted to talk to Jessica really quick and just comment. I have really begun, I was talking about a colleague that I'd gone to, but before I even did that, I asked the kids about their life and about their culture and about their family. I would grab a couple kids here and there and have lunch with them and just try to engage a conversation, wanting to learn more about them. So and my approach was, I really want to be what you need as a teacher, not only in reading, but raising you to be the best that you can be. And they were really, they love to talk. Most kids love to talk about their family. It can be a trigger, so you do have to be careful. I think depending, I gave them free rein, whoever they wanted to speak to about that was special to them, that they're close to, because I didn't want to put family in there because family is so different and diverse now. So I didn't want, I still have trauma from not growing up with grandparents on Grandparents' Day in elementary school and never having the honor of having any of that present. So I'm really mindful about, kids who have different situations or whatever, but I just wanted them to tell me what their day's like, what their home's like, just try to understand. And that was a fun way to not only, deepen my connection with them, but it also allowed me to learn a little bit more about the culture. So then I had a little bit more knowledge when I went to speak about adults. And I would say, I'm hearing the kids say this, is it like this for you? Or, really being curious and open and honest about things really helped me. So it's a journey for sure.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I think my school is not very diverse. And I think there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstandings around different cultures and different ways of life, and not having a classroom of my own. I see kids individually. I don't go into classrooms and teach lessons. But the counselor in our school has been very much targeting like these kinds of conversations about neurodiversity and racial diversity, and being kind to everybody and thinking about the structures that are in our systems that affect different communities in different ways. But then when we have situations where racial slurs are being used in our school by third graders who have, not had experiences meeting people from different races, like talking to parents about those kinds of conversations and assessing their values and where those kinds of things are coming from. I just want to be better at having those conversations to support the families and the kids.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to ask Tovi a question or have her elaborate on the concept of liminal space. I learned about that from you at our last in-person conference just right before COVID happened. And maybe you could show how that within this framework that you shared today, this growth within these zones of how that fits in.
Thank you. Liminal space is a concept around like the openness and non-attachment to, I would say, like the time on your journey. It's an open space that just is almost like a free falling, but a surrendering. And not free falling in a way that's like, oh, I'm out of control, but like the surrender of just the fallback, and I'm gonna go where this journey takes me. I'm gonna ride the wind of this fall, if you will. And not even a fall, but just even, just again, that surrendering. And so this liminal space is the area of possibility, right? Because we don't know how it's going to end. We don't know how we're going to land. And so this liminal space, we treat it as being held in our transformation, being gently held to let the transformation unfold without trying to control it. So we give ourselves the proper conditions. We give ourselves the nurturing that's necessary and the shaping that's necessary, but we're not over attached to the outcome and thinking that we can completely control the outcome, because we can't. And so we open up to this liminal space, like with great intention of just really owning that we're in process, and we are being worked through the process, but also working through the process. So I hope that that's helpful. And so in these growth zones, trust that you're in liminal space, right? But as long as you're moving, liminal space is also about not being stagnant. It's kind of like too, when you think about when a plant or a seed, we put it in the soil. And for me and my approach in this work, the moment you put that seed in the soil, the work is starting. And the seed is growing roots down and in that you can't even see. All we're looking for is a freaking plant, right? But if those roots aren't strong, your plant's not going to be beautiful and strong. So you want to support and nurture the soil. You want to support the conditions. You want to support the depth of the growth first inward before you start going outward, right? Because it's kind of like, to the example that we start having these conversations with kids and doing things with kids, if you haven't done your work in a way that lets you be there with grounded confidence, you can be creating harm, right? Because your inner growth hasn't happened yet. You're not rooted. Grounded confidence is like being rooted in that, right? So you don't have to be this perfect, huge, flourishing tree, but you at least need to be able to have your roots strong enough that you broke through the soil, right? And the plant's coming out. So now I can have this conversation. Now I can support this. even when I'm shaking in my boots about it. They don't need to know all that, right? We see the duck like just swimming up, but underneath it's like, you don't need to see all that. You just see the duck, right? Yeah. So that's what it can feel like in leading these conversations, no matter how seasoned we are. Yeah. Thanks for that question, Tracy.
Any other questions? Maybe do one more question or any sharing.
We're trying to start a celebration of diversity group here at the school for families. Kind of meeting. Our plan is to meet monthly after school, at least once a month, if not twice. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's really done a lot of work with this, and she worked with New Hampshire Listens in her school, and they came in and basically ran these kinds of groups outside, or hired people to come in. And we are such a small school. My counselor is like really gung-ho about it, and my fear is that, like you said, that we haven't done the work ourselves to be able to lead families in the right kind of way, to not be creating harm or creating a space where people can be harmful to each other, either on purpose or accidentally. You know, I just wondered if you had any advice on where to start.
Yeah, thank you, Jessica. And it's rarely on purpose that we cause harm, right? So this whole concept around aggressions that are also formally known as microaggressions often happen when we do things like what you're describing. It doesn't have to happen, but it has to be carefully handled. The reason when you first asked the question that I kind of giggled and smiled is because I live directly across the street, like literally across the street from me. It's not another house, it's an elementary school. And they were holding a cultural night last month. And they had these huge banners on the fences, you know, cultural night's happening, come to cultural night. Be sure to come in your costume of any cultural group that you want. Cultural groups, we do not wear costumes. We wear costumes at Halloween. We don't wear costumes in our daily cultural attire. So the framing for that would simply be cultural attire is welcome. Right. And so it's those kinds of nuances that you feeling okay, you're feeling that you have to just be aware of. Right. And so whether your school is small or not, having a consultant to support you or someone to shape it and make sure the messaging is good and the languaging is good, and having parents, you know, support what this looks like is really important. And we don't want to trivialize cultural groups down to like food and location and attire and things. So just being, you know, all mindful. The most important thing that can be happening are like really good conversations, right? How are we just learning about each other and connecting? So tribes activities, and that's so old school, but tribes still works, y'all. And just different activities to really have families come together and, like Dina said, to be sharing. So how can sharing happen? But we don't want to encourage cultural misappropriation, like using phrases like costumes and then having people like show up in who knows what, right? That could really be offensive to people. So those are things to just kind of think about. I appreciate you all joining me for today. This is my last equity conversation as president, taking us a little break, and then we'll be resuming our cultural and equity conversations for sure. And I'm just going to be doing that out of love for CASM and being an advisory support person and holding space for continued growth, because it's such an organization that I believe in and am committed to, and is spreading goodness throughout the world.
Yeah. Thank you, Tovi. And yes, I was so happy that you have the bandwidth to stay on to continue the equity-based conversation series, and Cosm support you in that work that you are doing. It's all, this is all you, and it just the right groups of people come together for them. Even though we were a small group tonight, this was really powerful sharing and conversations we had. And if you want to hear more from Tovi on our member site in the Learning Center area. So in our last in-person conference, so it'll show up as MCon 2020. She did the opening keynote for that, super powerful. She led a panel of equity thought leaders, super powerful. It's all recorded. And then all of the equity conversations, 12 so far in, I think 2 years, So all of those are, if you want to get PD hours for them, watch them through our member site, because it's all view trackable there, and you can earn clock hours and CEUs for watching them. Otherwise, they're all available as well, just on our website. And if you haven't read her chapter in our Educating Mindfully book, it's chapter 40, last chapter, save the best for last. It is, I mean, I would say that'd be worth just getting the book just for that chapter, and sharing it with all your colleagues. And it could help start,
It's
if
a
you're
great book.
starting a group at your school, to start with her chapter is a great jumping off point. But I want to keep singing praises here. And I just am so appreciative for having met Tovi and have her be a mentor for me in my leadership skills. Again, when I decided to found Cosm, there's been no training. I've been, with leadership, I've been leaning in and learning all kinds of new things. And that is the power of the coalition. And now I'm learning with other people, and it's so fun. And I may have founded it, but it's a we situation here. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight.
Thank you all. Thank you. I really so appreciate the opportunity to share with you all and to spend time with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tovi.
Absolutely.